I will call to order the November 21st Planning Commission for the town of Fairfax. Can we have a roll call?
Here.
Vice Chair Lamont.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez-Palmer.
Here.
And Commissioner Essett is absent at this moment. Go through my microphone.
We have to use our microphones so that they can hear it for our viewing audience out there for the recording. Also wanted to make a note for anybody who's watching. If you want to share your views on any of the items that we discuss here, I don't know about anyone else, but I personally use social media, and if you wanted to tweet any comments with the hashtag of Fairfax PC, I sometimes do random searches on Twitter for that. So just let me know what you want to comment on, and I'll at least pay attention to that. Okay, so now we are on approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, agenda passes. So now we have a moment for anyone here to speak to items not on the agenda. So this is for public comments of non-agenda items. If there's anyone here who would like to make a comment to us. Okay, this is a great opportunity for the public to come if they ever want to speak to us about something not on our agendas. Now there are no consent items, so we will move right along to public hearing item number 177 Frustuck Avenue with the staff report.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Mrs. Neal cannot make it tonight, so I'll be presenting the report and handling this application permit. To start with, we just received, prior to the beginning of this meeting, a letter from a neighbor on Manzanita Road expressing concern about the parking for this application, stating that there had been calls to the police regarding the issue of inability to progress through the Fruchtstuck-Manzanita hairpin turn, and we will add this to the record. I don't have copies, but it's expressing concern about the parking issue. Also, I'd like to explain that yesterday, prior to this meeting, I sat down with Mr. Owens, the applicant, and his attorney, Alan Mayer, with our attorney, Katie Wazinski, on the telephone, and we had a meeting to discuss the issues. And I think I can say fairly that Mr. Owens' attorney and I concurred that the germane issue here tonight is the fourth floor variance. That's the key to this application. And as you can see from the rich history on this application, when it went through before and was denied and then appealed and denied on appeal, we're basically back with virtually the same application with the same issues. And then finally, the applicant has made a contention, has accused us of violating the Permit Streamlining Act. That was another reason for us getting together with the lawyers. And we have a difference of opinion on that. And so that is not a piece of what you are entertaining tonight, regardless of what statements might be made. That's being handled by counsel with the town. And we're here to conduct a public hearing, which, regardless of any contentions that might be out there, is what's required by law to process this application. So I'm going to go through this rather succinctly. Again, the background is complete. The discussion section discusses how this application complies with the second unit in the residential single-family RS6 zone. We listed after that what would be necessary in order to approve residential second units and the discretionary permits that are required. One little correction, we referenced this residential second unit use permit, and it's a strange quirk in our code that we actually have a section of the ordinance that references an amnesty ordinance that actually expired. But in that code, it actually kicks you back to another section of the code, 17048-100, which is referencing how second units require a use permit by the Planning Commission. That's one correction I'd like to make for the record. Moving on, the staff report discusses second unit regulations. It talks about how, in fact, the issues that are before you tonight with regards to the fourth floor policy decision and the second unit parking within the side yard setback and the public right-of-way would be contrary to the code. So those are the two germane issues, and I would argue that you don't really need to even get to the parking issue if you can't get to the variance for the height. The parking issue becomes moot. But both issues are very clearly defined in the town code with regards to the maximum height in this zone, which is also in the Hill area residential development zone because it's in a slide zone. The code is very specific about 35 feet or 3 floors. And likewise, the code is very specific about how, when you have a second unit application like this, that both the primary residence and the second unit parking need to be on site. So if you were to move towards variances on the height and variances on the second unit parking, those would be precedent setting. Staff has taken a position that's boxed in at the end of the decision that this is a policy decision. And in essence, the the town council is elected as the policy makers. Your task, as always, is to interpret the town code and make findings based on facts of law. So we are cautioning you very carefully, very adamantly, to consider carefully what you do tonight with regards to precedent setting. If you look at our recommendations, open to public hearing, take testimony, close to public hearing, and number 3, move to deny application 13/31 by adoption of resolution number 13-9, including the findings contained therein. That is provided for you tonight. If you should decide to go another direction, then we recommend you task us with coming back with findings that reflect your discussion tonight for a resolution accepting the application at a subsequent meeting tonight. So the attachments are as listed. Mr. Owens also provided us with two large binders at the beginning of the week that list the history both of this application and the prior application. It was a lot of material. We were in a little bit of a wrestling match as to whether or not they would need to provide all the copies, so we sort of split the issue in half and scanned what we thought was germane to this application and made the binder 1, which is the prior round on the application, available to the public, as you know. Let's see. So, any questions? Yes.
So just, I think to clarify, the second unit amnesty only applied to existing units that were already in place and being used.
Correct.
And this is a brand new proposal. So
That's correct.
Any of the things, even though it's expired, any of the exceptions that had been created for the second unit amnesty program would never apply in a situation like this because it's not.
There was a mistake in the staff report, and it actually was a backdoor way to get to the relevant code that I referenced, 17048100, which is where it says they must go through your hearing for a use permit since the application does not comply with all aspects of the code. Also, our town ordinance goes into detail about what is required if you were to move in the direction of variance, and you have to make specific findings within the confines of the law. If you get to that point, I'll review it with you, but it's not necessary unless you get to that point.
Are there clarification questions for staff?
I would like you to clarify the definition of story because it seems to differ how I interpret it.
Well, you're catching me off guard with my knowledge of the code. That's where Linda Neal comes in so helpfully. If we get to the point where that becomes more important, I have her on hold at 9 o'clock. for a phone call where we can dig into the code if necessary. But off the top of my head, I cannot get you to that point except to reiterate staff's interpretation of the stories. Let me give you a little background, though. After this house was permitted to be built, the applicant came in with an application for a garage with storage underneath. And it was the interpretation of staff at that time that a separate structure on the property that is 2 floors per the code requires a height variance. At that time, it's my understanding, this is before I got here, that the applicant argued adamantly that the garage and storage area was attached to the house, and regardless of that our code said it had to share a wall, because a beam and some of the infrastructure for the structures were connected, that we should view the garage with the storage underneath as a part of the house. That then happened, it was granted, and it created a first floor of the garage, a second floor of living area, and a third floor of living area. Are you with me? At the appeal hearing, the applicant had not yet built the garage, and I actually offered up the idea that if the applicant wanted to back off his entitlements for the garage, then maybe that would be a win-win, where the council then could grant the allowance of the second unit on the lower floor that would then comprise 3 floors to the structure. The applicant turned down that offer, rejected it, and went forward with building the garage attached to the house based on his own argument that made 3 floors. And I can start to look for that definition if you like.
I can find it and I copy it. So I have one.
Okay.
I just wanted staff's
I just wanted staff's interpretation because
Right.
it seemed to differ.
Right,
from-
and I apologize, I don't have the institutional knowledge of the code, and that's why we do always request questions ahead of time so we can do our homework for you.
And I spoke to Linda about it too because I was concerned about that, but I thought it would be
So you did-
helpful. I thought it would be helpful for the
Oh,
other
great, and I
commissioners.
stand ready to
hear
listen
that.
to any discussion with regards to how we interpret floors.
Any other questions for staff before we bring up the applicant?
I have one question, is I note that on the plans at page A1.3, there's a fire engine turnaround right next to the smaller parking space, and I was wondering if there was any consideration of any impact on that with the property.
It would have shown up in the fire department's review of the project if there was.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify, and And I've been on the commission for almost eight years, I think. Maybe it feels like 10, I don't know. And I actually asked staff, and it was my recollection that there have not been any fourth stories approved as part of the planning commission, at least since I've been on. And
That's correct, and I also visited that issue with Ms. Neal, who's been here 27 years, and to her knowledge, there's been no fourth floor exceptions.
okay. Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay, let's go ahead and bring up the applicant to tell us about the project.
John Owens, 177 Frostock Avenue. Just for the record, when we did apply for the garage, and it was an attached garage, I had 9 documents signed by the town that actually said it was attached garage from the original application, so I was just going by what the town had written. So just wanted to put that on the record. Again, this is for the record. The Planning Commission agenda, the staff report, contained mistakes and misstatements. I've asked on multiple occasions for the staff report to be corrected, and the town refused to do so. I do not believe that a fair hearing could happen tonight because of the mistakes and inaccuracies, and The copies of my objections and letters, I think, are in your packet, but I did complain about that. But that's not the main issue. That said, I'd like to talk about the crux of the application, which involves the town making an exception to approve the application for an affordable housing unit. The application's not for a hillside mansion, it's not for a housing tract, it's for the conversion of an existing space into a LEED certified second unit. We'll not be constructing anything, we're merely infilling a space underneath a house, an existing home. The town is under pressure to provide the opportunity for 172 housing units to be built by next year, 2014. In my opinion, there's currently no programs and there's no current applications for people to build affordable housing. And I also know that applications typically take 2 years before something can be built. So I think that's an important fact. For this project to be approved, it will need 2 variances. Variances are approved by the Planning Commission on a regular basis. Some projects require more than 2 variances, and it does not require a policy change or the changing of the town ordinances. If no exceptions were allowed in this town, the word variance wouldn't exist. So variances are approved all the time. I'm asking for the same privileges afforded the 3 housing units, second units that were approved on 88 Dominga, 17 Vista Way, and 130 Mono Avenue. These are all second units that were approved, and they were all done with multiple variances. This is also the same privilege that is currently granted to all the illegal second units in the town, and the estimations range from anywhere like 87 units to 300 units. And in my neighborhood, there are already second units currently in our neighborhood. The greatest sticking point is the 4-story issue. Firstly, our house is only viewed as a 4-story in the town of Fairfax. Currently, in most other locations, it would be viewed as a 2-story house. There's an existing 4-story house in my neighborhood, which is 3 doors away. I think it's been there one of the oldest houses in the neighborhood, but it is 4 stories. I've not had the time to conduct an audit of all the hillside homes in Fairfax, but I'm sure within Fairfax, if we have between 87 and 300 illegal housing units, they have to be infilled under property, and I'm sure that 4-story examples do exist, and I'm just asking for the same privilege that other people with 4 stories have. Remember that we were talking about affordable housing. It's for the workers, it's for the public of Fairfax. The town code and the housing element state that exceptions will be made to facilitate affordable housing. The town is under the gun to facilitate affordable housing, and I believe the granting of this application is not the grant of a special privilege and is well within the scope of the housing element and the housing code. Thank you.
All right, are there questions of the applicant?
I have a question. I took a look at the Bing map for your property, just put in the address, and it popped up John Owens Services. So at your address with a different Fairfax phone number of 456-2906. And if you want to see this, I have a copy. What is John Owens Services, and why is it listed at that address?
That's the name of my business, and that's not our business address. Our business address happens to be a P.O. box in Fairfax. I don't know why it's listed.
So the question is, do you have any intent to use any part of your house for business visitors or storage of equipment? You do plumbing, I understand.
I have storage inside. I keep my truck in the driveway. That's all I do from home.
That's
And I have a storage facility in San Rafael. Yeah.
Where do you have offices?
The offices is, the business is myself and my wife, so we operate from home.
Okay, thank you.
So you mentioned there's two variances, but there's also permits. And those permits essentially, an encroachment permit is essentially an acknowledgement that while it may not be called a variance, it's actually the use of public space for private use. That's what an encroachment permit would be.
Which every driveway in Fairfax has an encroachment permit.
I think it's important to be careful with making broad generalizations. I want to ask, you mentioned three properties where there were second units permitted. I believe those were all under the second unit amnesty program.
No.
Okay. Were any of them a fourth floor?
No.
Okay. All of the fourth floor units that you've talked about, do any of them have permits from the town that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay. And I just want to bring that up because I think there's a difference between units and you're asking for an exception and an entitlement to have a use, and I appreciate that you're actually asking for a permit. Those other units, if they exist, they are illegal, and if through transaction of a sale or anything else, those would be identified by the town and either brought forward for the same consideration, the same due consideration. We've had other situations where in the last year we actually had a situation where during a remodel the original plans weren't looking at a level that would constitute a story. As they got into it and after they did a lot of the construction, the town, I think it was the building inspector, identified that it did then meet the definition of a story as a fourth story, and they had to come in and ask for a permit. It was rejected. So I want to make sure that there aren't any situations that you are aware of that are actually the same as the situation that you're asking for in terms of coming to the Planning Commission and actually being granted an exception.
No, I am asking for an exception, that's correct.
And then the other thing, and I think it's fair, I think talking about variances and the town is certainly the zoning of the town, the 1919 plots that, make parcels 25, 30, 40, 50 feet wide. And then the 1970s, I think it was the 1970s where sort of the setback variance, the setback requirements and things like that were established. So it is true that many applications, nearly all, do require a use permit because typically the lots don't accommodate. And there are a number of situations that the Planning Commission has established variances on side setbacks, front setbacks, rear setbacks. And I think the distinction that I am asking with the fourth story is that is one exception that really hasn't been a variance that hasn't been granted, and that is why it's identified in the report as it's an exception and it's a variance, but it's very different. We've actually rejected a number of applications. On the flats, it's actually a third story that's considered a height exception, and there have been a number of applications in the flats as well that are third story applications that are not meeting the height limit. And then on the hills, it's the fourth story. So I think I wanted to make sure that there weren't any that I wasn't aware of that you found in your research, but it sounds like there aren't.
I haven't,
fourth stories. permitted 4 stories.
I have not had time to research that. It became really a discussion item yesterday when I met with Mr. Moore, that this became more of a discussion item just from yesterday.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anything about the project that is different from when it came before us in 2009 and when it went before the town council on appeal during that time period that motivated you to resubmit, or is there something different about it?
My motivation, I actually believe in affordable housing, and I've always believed in the flexibility of buildings. I don't think I'll ever live in just a plain single-family residence again.
Is there anything different, though, structurally or design-wise
No.
from this application from before?
The only thing that's different is that my motivation to bring this forward was the looming deadline of, the housing element of 172 housing units, which comes up next year. And as far as, I don't know factually, but I think within the last 2 time periods within the HCD, the Housing and Community Development, I think only 3 second units have been produced in the town. Okay. And so I'm asking for an exception to try and meet those housing units.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant before we open it up to the public? No? All right, thank you very much. All right, now we will take public comment on this application. So anyone from the public who would like to speak, come up. You have 3 minutes at the podium. State your name and your address and tell us what you'd like us to know.
My name is good evening. My name is Françoise Ramsey, and even though I now live in Nevada City, I'm a former long-time Fairfax resident of Fairfax. My husband, Peter Ramsey, is a former planning commissioner and also a former member of the Affordable Housing Committee. In 2008, we began the process of legalized a non-conforming illegal unit under an amnesty program. The entire process took 2.5 years to complete and to get final approval. So it took a lot of time and energy and interaction with the town staff. So at Peter's suggestion, the planning director proposed to eliminate the requirement for fire sprinklers, which was a big deal for existing illegal second units. So this required a modification of the state fire code, and that was strongly opposed by the fire marshal at first. The ordinance was passed unanimously by the town council, and that was quite an exception, and it saved us roughly $50,000 in construction and repair costs. And that was one of the several exceptions that were made for our application. Another one was a parking requirement that we could not meet unless some setback parking or parking in the setback was accepted, and that was. And I think a third variance was the ratio between our main residence and this second unit. The second unit, if I remember well, was above 50% of our main residence. Therefore, it was not in compliance, so there was another variance that was accepted. So this whole process took a lot of footwork and goodwill and flexibility and time and work and money, but in the end we were able to complete this application, and when we sold our house we benefited from having a legal second unit, and we reckon that the sale price was, I don't know, maybe up to $200,000 more than if it had been just a non-conforming unit. So it was a real benefit to us. So all I wanted to say is that if the town is really sincere and willing to create more affordable housing, there is a real need to selectively ban some rules, some code, to make this happen, to get the result, or at least some result in that context. So I'm talking from the perspective of someone who benefited from it, and we did not find the process at all easy or simple at all. It was frustrating at times, but in the end we appreciated the goodwill, and without it we would have been obviously back to square one. So I know that the process can work, and so I was just wanting to make a statement to support John Owen's application, because in his case it's really falls within the footprints of his existing structure, and yes, it needs variance, but I don't know of any existing project that doesn't need some level of variance. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, town staff, and fellow citizens, my name is Chris Lang from Canyon Road. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the application. When I was on the Planning Commission, whenever that was, I was against allowing a second unit in the home 2 doors down from Mr. Owens, because I thought increasing traffic in a neighborhood with a very small road wasn't right. Increasing density in a very tight neighborhood wasn't appropriate. It's different than Cascade Drive. But I feel that the formula we used to calculate increased traffic based on more dwelling units was flawed, because we calculated, and I think this is more for like a mansion than a little second unit, there would be 10 additional traffic trips per day. But it factors in the mailman and the gardeners and the nannies and the pool guys and all these people that could support a bigger house with a big family in it. And I think that's the fallacy of thinking that another dwelling unit is going to create that much more traffic. I've worked on Frustuck for like 30 years off and on, and the traffic seems pretty low in intensity. There's not a lot of pools there, big gardens or anything like that. So it's pretty quiet, actually. There is a problem at the corner, for the record, nothing to do with this application, at Frustuck and Mountain View, whatever it is, just up the road a little bit from Mr. Owens' property. It needs a little bit of attention there, because cars park in the wrong spots. It's very difficult to get down Frustuck. But I think that the applicant's sort of caught on the horns of a dilemma. On one hand, you have your hillside residential development permit process, very stringent. But then on the other hand, we can't use a space that's seismically sound underneath. And this is the question of the fourth story, I understand. But I believe that we might want to reconsider that and look at that as a policy. Because I've heard over and over of people not being allowed to utilize the space underneath their garage, et cetera, even if it's seismically sound, for storage or just a finished space. Now, a dwelling unit, my understanding is all it needs is a bathroom, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a parking spot. And if Mr. Owen can provide a parking spot that does not encroach upon the actual asphalt of the roadway, the encroachment permit is a formality, I would suggest. It's a formality, because most of those narrow streets will never be widened. The property line is 20 feet from the center of the asphalt. You can't even tell without a survey. But almost everyone's homes and driveways and carports, et cetera, are in the city right-of-way there. partially, because it's so wide. It's actually still technically 40 feet up on that street, I believe. So I feel like a couple of the permits that he's asking for are sort of boilerplate, able to grant. I think the key issue here is if the envelope of the building is not going to change and it's seismically sound and the applicant is able to provide a parking space, my understanding it would be a fourth space, from my recollection of the rules. 2 for the home, 1 guest spot, and 1 for the second unit. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe for a legal second unit, you're going to need 4 spots, and they can be rated as compact. You would care to respond? Okay. All right. So, like I said, I think it's important for 3 reasons. Number 1, that it's not going to change the footprint of the building. My understanding is the density increase in the neighborhood is going to be negligible. Dwelling units are needed in Fairfax. Technically, the state is going to withhold a $300,000 grant to redevelop the parkade if the housing element's not accepted. And so the goal for the last 5 years has been for Fairfax, the town of Fairfax, to facilitate the creation of 1 dwelling unit per month. And as we know, we've only gotten 3 legal second units legalized in the last few years. I feel like this particular second unit is worthy because the building is modern, and it also gives us a chance to fine-tune our regulations a little bit, such as creating that 4th story, because almost all hillside houses are going to be stepped like that. And if the building's not getting any bigger from the original entitlement, then it seems reasonable and logical to allow an increased use in that structure. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to come up and speak?
My name is Barbara Cassidy, and I live at 24 Walsh Lane, just around the corner from Mr. Owens. And I would just like to express my concern for the parking. Contrary to what Mr. Lang feels, I live there, and I know what the traffic is like and the parking. There's often cars parked on both sides of the street, not observing the 12-foot clearance. There are cars parked and trucks parked in the emergency lanes, and it makes it very difficult to maneuver the narrow street and the hairpin turns. I'm not opposed to the project at all. I'm just concerned regarding safety and the congestion. I worry about emergency vehicles being able to pass when needed. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Randall Gillette, 111 Frustuck Avenue, Fairfax resident for about 22 years. I support the project. I'm acquainted with John and his wife. I'm familiar with what he's trying to do there. And I have a letter here that I'd like to submit for the record. It's nothing special. Just I was prompted to go actually read the general plan of our town in preparing to come down here tonight, and in it I found various objectives and goals of our town, and it all relates for me to affordable housing. And so I just quoted a bunch of things in the general plan and note that we are way behind the power curve for achieving our stated goals with that document. And I echo some of the comments of the previous speaker, Chris Lang, with regard to, everybody talks about infill land use nationwide as kind of the answer to some of our problems. And this is it, in my opinion. And beyond that, with regard to, we all know that there's tons of illegal units in our town. There's tons of illegal units in all towns in the county. And I've been in plenty of them, and I'm sure everybody on the department has been. And there's some pretty scary non-code things that are actually a dangerous thing to the town with regard to fire, earthquake. This is a modern building that received all the up-to-date codes that was built recently. And beyond that, it's a LEED certified building, for crying out loud. This is representative, in my opinion, of what the town is and what the direction we're trying to move forward in as our values as citizens of the town. And I fully support all those values. I support most everything I see in the general plan, and it just seems to me, and I don't have all the answers, I recognize it's a hugely complex issue to make. It seems to be this four-story thing. It's the stumbling block and a precedent setting. I understand precedents in the legal system, we all do, but it just seems frankly kind of ridiculous that a project like this wouldn't be approved. And I'm not saying that because I'm acquainted with my neighbor. It's just in general. It just seems odd to me that we state all these things as who we are as a town, and yet we fall short. Not all the time, but sometimes we fall short, and I think it's time to maybe think about that a little harder. Step away from the rule book and think outside the box a little bit. Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Excuse me, Larry Bragman from 30 Hickory Road. Excuse me. I'm here as a private citizen. I'm within 500 feet of the project. I always have been. Never voted on the project. I moved to 30 Hickory, I think right when the project was approved by the town council in 2004. A little nervous. A neighbor of mine sent me an email. I want to read it to you. And that's what prompted me to come in. So I want to read that first, and then I do have some thoughts of my own. It says, "Hi Larry, Martin and I have been in Oregon for several weeks and just returning tomorrow. We just got our forwarded mail, which included a notice about 177 Frustic, the addition that we are concerned about. We kind of always saw this coming, and even at present, the situation doesn't seem workable due to the lack of adequate parking for the construction/residence that is already there. Ever since the property was built, we almost never have available parking for friends and guests in front of our house at 215. John has a construction business, and often his crew will park down below, probably even as far down as your house, and then go up to carpool in a larger truck or whatever, I'm not sure. There have also been problems with long-term parking of John's professional vans, as well as the Ideal van, which I put notices out about, and hasn't happened as much since then. We hate to be targeted as complainants, but we do want you to be aware of the problem, as I'm sure you already are. We actually are driving back to Fairfax on Thursday, but not likely that we'll be there in time for the meeting. Just wanted you to be aware of the problem that already exists and can only get worse. So this should probably go in the record. For my own personal opinion, I really have always tried to accommodate my neighbors. John is a neighbor above me, so his lot, the bottom of that lot meets the back of my lot on Frustic. When the project first came to the council in 2004, it was approved with a deed restriction that restricted, supposedly for all time, the construction of an in-law unit on this story. So when is a decision final? And for Phil, I'm sure he knows the legal term, when is there res judicata? When is there a final decision? Well, I think when the council made as a condition of the construction of the home a restriction that it not add that fourth story, that was an attempt to reach finality in order to accommodate the project and to allow it to go forward. And that was a condition that was accepted, and apparently a deed restriction was filed. I've never seen it. I saw it mentioned in the record as I skimmed through your packet at my office this afternoon. It came back to us a few years later. I guess it was back in 2009. Obviously, I stepped down, didn't take part in that decision. There was a decision made then in order to accommodate him, to accommodate Mr. Owens and his wife, to allow construction of this garage in an effort to really, sort of split the baby and make it work for them. And that was a decision, again, that was a condition that was accepted as part of the condition of construction, of improvement. And we made the decision, and now we're here back again for a third or fourth bite at the apple. So when is a decision that we make final? When is a decision that we make respected? And I don't think that's been demonstrated by the applicant. Has there been an offer to put a condition on this unit that it will be affordable? And if there is, how will that be done? By a deed restriction? Deed restrictions don't seem to really be of consequence. So that's my feeling about the matter. There's other projects I'm sure you're aware of. There was one on Acacia where this commission denied a four-story construction. And there's reasons why the policy has been against 4 stories. One is character, another is density, another is public safety, because there's difficulty getting fire equipment 4 stories. So, I have a lot of respect for what you do and how you do it. I think the decision, I thought the decision was made a long time ago. I guess nothing's ever final. I guess that's something I'm learning the longer I'm in public life. But I think a decision was made, and I think we need to enforce it. Thanks a lot. And I'll give this to the clerk.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? Okay, then what we will do is bring it back up to the commission for discussion and then action. And I would like to just ask that we first, there are a number of different variances here, but as recommended by the staff, and I would support that as well, that we discuss first the fourth story issue before moving on to other issues. And if we can figure that one out or not, and kind of take it one by one and start there. I know I've been on the commission same length of time as Brandon, and this has come up before with the 4 stories. I do think that there are circumstances in which an envelope of a building is an existing envelope, and 4 stories is perfectly something that can be revisited. And we've got 2 different roles up here on the Planning Commission. We've got a quasi-judicial role, which is interpreting the existing law, and we have a legislative role, which is changing the town code and changing the law. So all too often, those 2 things often bump into each other, where we have to make a decision based on the existing code that maybe we don't necessarily agree with on a legislative basis, and would prefer to actually make the code change to fit what we would like to have. But we do have to make our decisions based on the existing code. And with respect to variances in the town and making exceptions, one of the things that while frustrating, I appreciate about our quasi-judicial role in interpreting the code is that we don't make it based on personality or personal, I like this color better than that color, or I personally prefer lattice over something else. That we make it based on the town code, which is set by a legislative process. And that makes it fair for everybody, so that we don't do it because our friends like it it takes that kind of subjectiveness out of it, for better or worse. But in order to approve a variance, we have certain conditions that we have to, by law, findings that we have to make to be able to approve a variance. So it's not just that we choose to make an exception, that we have to actually have findings. So going from there, if there are findings that we can make to approve a fourth story, that's what we need to focus on. Whether or not we think that the law is correct, that's another conversation, and I'm actually happy to have it, but I think that's a separate conversation that we could even have in our discussion time after this. And I kept writing, I mean, there's a number of things in our code that conflict with our town plan that I would like to see, and we'll have a discussion tonight about our action items, and one of them is to revise or look at revising our town code to fit with our aspirations for our town. So that's just what I'd like to say in terms of the fourth story, is that what's before us and what's often frustrating is that in order, if we do want to make a finding, we have make a decision, we have to have findings. So I will open it up to others if anyone has any other. I personally don't think we can come to any findings. Whether or not I would like to approve it or not, I can't come to any legal findings on this project. Haven't been able to do it on other fourth stories. But I do agree that when a building's envelope isn't going to change, parking aside, but when there is a building with space that's seismically and public safety and all those other kinds of things, and I do think that we need to do better in supporting our aspirations for affordable housing in terms of the way that we do it, but I can't find any findings for a fourth story at this time in our code.
Can I say something? You know, I do appreciate everything that was presented and the frustration, but to me this is a fire life safety issue for which the code was written, and by a lot of people, not just, you know, the town of Fairfax, but there are a lot of people behind these codes. You've got a lot of regulatory agencies, and, you know, there's a lot of thought that goes into these codes that are created, and they're for fire life safety of, you know, the residents and other people. So it's not, I think on the surface it seems like there's an easy solution, but I think this has to be taken way further back, and it does have to be taken at the code or the town code level with other regulatory agencies so that standards and criteria can be established for safety moving forward. So I don't see this as a variance issue necessarily, but more as a fire life safety issue.
Well, if I may address, number one, there was an issue. I applaud Mr. Owen's desire to have affordable housing. There's no doubt about that. I think that's a great idea. I believe, however, that the town is just about to be compliant, you may not know this, with the state mandate for affordable housing. And we've identified properties, because I served on the Affordable Housing Committee, and we've gone through the analysis, and the town is about to be compliant, actually. So even though we may have had only 3 units in the past, we are inches from compliance there. So that doesn't seem to be an issue, at least not with the state of California at the moment. Reading the section 17.080.060 on the third story, it's obvious that the situation is one of the slope of the hillside in relationship to health and safety, flooding, water flow, and on the, I pronounce this Frühstück, it's just my German education. The Frühstück Avenue does have quite a path to it for emergency vehicles as it is. Earlier I brought up a part of the plan where I see a fire truck turnaround immediately adjacent to the third or smaller parking space that's been proposed, which gives me a little bit of angst there, thinking if there was a truck parked there for a long term, could a fire truck reasonably access that area? And who knows what angle it may have to come in at. You just don't know in an emergency. But it seems that the ordinance is very clear that when you have a situation on the uphill side of the street, it shall not exceed 28.5 feet in height, nor contain more than 3 stories. So I also don't see how an exception can be granted here. The argument about the affordable housing is interesting, and it's, like I say, applaudable. Also, I want to point out the applicant's own letter of February 9th, 2009 points out how important it is for us to not set precedents that we don't want to have to live with in the future, where he discusses variances for the second units and gives several examples of variances for second units where he's analyzing precedents that we've set before. None of them include 4-story. So that alone, that discussion from the applicant's letters do indicate how important it is, because other applicants will be looking at what we do today and writing similar letters in the future.
Unfortunately, I sort of am siding on the same thing. Legally, I can't find any basis on which to grant a variance, and that when we look at variances when they are in place, there's a hardship that runs with the land that will preclude the owner from enjoying the same rights as everybody else. Giant boulder, redwood trees that can't be cut down, things on that nature, and unfortunately under this case that's not there. I agree that I applaud you for wanting to provide affordable housing, and it is a need. Maybe not now, but we certainly have that need, but we need to ensure that affordable housing is done in the right locations, in the right places, to ensure that the benefits for all of our community outweigh the costs of the community, whether it's parking and other types of externalities that will come from that. There are better places and worse places for us to site housing and affordable housing, and the whole scale of affordable, whether it's very low income or low income, 30% of median income, 50% of median income, all the different things that we can look at. And we do have to, as Commissioner both Ketchum and our chair has said, we have town codes that are in place, and unfortunately that's where we have to run from. If we want to change those codes, there are avenues in which to do so, and unfortunately this isn't the role of the commission to change those codes, whether or not 4 stories is good or the height restrictions are good. So we have to look at the codes as they are in place, and if there's legal grounds, and unfortunately I can't find anything here that would allow us to do that. Again, in principle, I love the idea of finding creative ways to provide affordable housing, but we have to do that within the confines of the town code as they're set right now.
I'm struggling with the classification of calling this a 4th story, because in my 26-year professional career, I have not seen story interpreted the way that it is by the town. The definition in the code book says it's the portion of a building included between the surface of a floor and the surface of the floor, above and below, and the building code uses that same way. So I've always interpreted a story to be when they are, stacked, aligned with each other. So I see the garage as like a 2-story structure. I mean, it's connected with a roof element, but then the house is a separate 3-story element. And on the staff report, on page 3, under the discussion, it's even described as a 2,093 square foot single family resident, 400 square foot garage with a 400 square foot storage room beneath it, exist on a site comprising 3 floors. So I see this as a 3-story house. I mean, it's common for a hillside project where you would, the structure would like kind of, move down the hillside so that it's not as bulky and as massive, so.
For clarification, the staff report saying that as it sits right now, it's 3 floors. Adding the unit in the understory would comprise a 4th floor.
But the way that I interpret the code, I mean, the house itself, it's got the main floor, it's got a 2nd floor underneath, the bedroom floor, and then this, I would see it as a 3rd floor.
Regardless of what had been said by the applicant about the letters on file from my predecessor acknowledging that the garage was attached to the house, that was after my understanding a long, arduous discussion with the applicant and an attorney arguing that that garage should be considered a piece of the house and constitute a floor so that it did not require a variance as a detached 2-story structure. So in this case, the applicant previously argued that he did not need a variance because the garage and the understory were attached to the house and a part of the house. So with all respect to how you're interpreting it based on your experience, the record is that in fact he took advantage of making the case that it is a piece of the house and a floor of the house. Otherwise, he would have had to have gotten a variance for the garage and the storage underneath.
Yeah, and having been on the commission at the time, that's exactly the argument, and that was the justification, and that's why the garage was actually approved, because these questions were being asked. The other points I think are important are that it was multiple bites at the apple, and I've been concerned about piecemealing in the past, and I know there's a process for, after a year you can make new applications and things like that. But I do think, again, if this entire project came to us as a single proposal, it would be looked at very differently than a garage here, a 4th unit, or a 2nd unit, 4th story here. So again, I think we have to look at it. I mean, that's the way I look at it as a whole. And again, the justification for the height, it would have been a height variance to the garage, and that was a huge concern about view shed, about affecting a number of other things with the garage at that time. So that was a serious consideration that we were making at the time. I think a couple of other points that were made that I think are important about both findings and 4th story is the character of Fairfax. And I think that has been the character of Fairfax. And again, I've been on the commission for 8 years, and that's been how the character has been interpreted. I appreciate that the commission does have an opportunity and can take up things that lead to ordinances that could be recommended to the town council. The town council could consider them, and I think that is an appropriate process if that was something that the commission were interested in, because I think it gives opportunity to have the discussion not based upon one specific request, but as a whole. And that's where you can really consider what is the character of the town. There have been a number of applications that have been denied, and I'm the first to say as soon as there's a 4th story approved by the town council, there's a few people to call and say, you know what, bring it back. But that's, again, I honor the people that have also applied for and been denied. When I look at the 4th story, it's not just this application, it's a 4th story. And again, everybody talks about a 3rd rail. In Fairfax, it seems to be the 4th story is the 3rd rail of Fairfax. Happy to discuss it further. I do want to bring up a couple of other things because I think they've come up. 2nd unit amnesty was looking at ways to identify exceptions that were acceptable to the town in order to bring units that already existed into compliance. Again, that's very different than development of a new unit. So looking for the same exceptions that you might have under an amnesty, I do think are different. I've been in the minority, but I feel very strongly that not requiring fire sprinklers for a 2nd unit is a disservice and a safety hazard to the individuals that are renting that. It's a convenience to the owners who can collect rent and feel good about it, but it doesn't actually contribute to the overall safety. It meets some of the housing needs, but it doesn't necessarily address some of the safety and protection values. And again, that process went through, and that exception does exist. But again, I don't think that is an exception that's related to this question. This question is an exception to the fourth story. So I do have some recommendations if we were to move to the resolution with regard to character, because I think that's valuable and important.
Well, I'm not going to go through it all. I've actually was on design review board when this house was first built, so I've been dragged through this history, and it's been really hard to focus my attention simply on the fourth floor. When you stand back from it, it's a great project. It's a great project. It's a great house. Done a great job. You're an excellent citizen to the town. But we don't allow 4 floors. Simply, we have to stand behind that. I totally agree with everything that was said about trying to be in compliance with the general plan, and it's an ongoing process. It's not something that happens overnight or with one application. I think we are seriously looking at affordable housing in this town, and I think we have a planning director who has put us on the right course and is getting us there. It's not something that happens fast, much as we would love for it to happen fast. We've all said it. We're all absolutely in favor of affordable housing, but not at the expense of public safety or going against code that we have absolutely set a precedent to uphold. I think it would be unfair to the people who have not gotten their 4th floor second units or their lofts or the things that rendered their 3rd or 4th floor the deal killer. So I think it would be unfair to approve based simply on that. So much as I respect you, John, and all you've been through, and I'm sorry that it's been such a slog for you and for everyone that's had to go through it, I think that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is the one that just is no. So that's how I feel about it, and I appreciate all of your input. I've learned a lot from you guys tonight too. So Shelley, you put it really succinctly about our role, and it's frustrating to have our hands tied in this way, but this is our code, and we've said it. I think we've said it for every 4th floor that we've been presented with. We really believe that this is a good thing, but we need to change our code to make it happen. We can't just make it happen project by project. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Well, hearing all the comments, unless there's anything else, we can entertain a motion. We're not going to open it back up. We don't. No, I'm gonna keep it up here. So.
I would move to make a motion denying, and correct me if I'm wrong, do we make separate motions or do we make a motion that takes an action on the application and the resolution at the same time? Okay, so I would make a motion to deny application 13-31 and based on the resolution 13-9, and I have a couple of amendments that I'm going to suggest. That on the resolution 13-9, the second whereas, the Planning Commission held a duly noticed public hearing on November 21st 2013. Rather than August 15th, which was when it was previously scheduled. And an amendment to now therefore be resolved item 6, the granting of the 4th story to this property would be a grant of special privilege to this site that would not be feasible to grant to property owners of upsloping sites and is not in character with the town of Fairfax.
Excuse me, can I make a comment? I didn't get there was an accident on 101, and so I can't make one comment.
At this point, we're right in the middle of a motion being made, so we can't take any more comment at this point. It's
due to an emergency?
At public comment time, we're right in the middle of a motion. We can't take any more
Okay, well, you
comments
guys
at
are
this
kind of
time.
wasting space. I mean, if you know.
Oh, thank you.
There's space underneath the house. And
I hear you, and we can't take a comment right now. We're in the middle of a resolution, so we will
and
listen.
What do we do about
Please
all
have
the
a
four
please.
stories
Excuse
that
me.
are already
We cannot take public comment from folks who walk in the middle of a process. I'm sorry.
So on item or number 6 of the resolution, granting of the 4th story of this property would be a grant of special privilege to the site that would not be feasible to grant to property owners of upsloping sites. And then the addition and is not in character with the town of Fairfax. Those are the 2 that I have, and I would be open to friendly amendments on any additional suggestions on the resolution.
So we have
friendly
a
question.
motion with 2 friendly amendments and a
Well,
friendly.
motion with 2 amendments and a question on
I
it.
just have a question. What that mean? Not in character with the town of Fairfax. What's physically? I mean, what are we talking about there? Character is such a big.
Is it part of the standard language of that finding?
It has been, and I'm looking for a resolution that's also in our packet that has similar language.
We actually have that on point number 7.
Okay, so it's on the next page.
Town code and will not change the character of the town.
Okay, so we don't need to amend it. It's already in the next one. So we don't need to be redundant. Thank you.
So we have a motion with one amendment to the
amendment.
date of the first whereas. Any other friendly amendments or seconds?
I'll second.
All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Just so we're clear, it's a motion to deny, so
It's
a
a-
yes is an agreement with the motion.
Yes, the motion is to deny the application by adopting Resolution 1309. So I means you approve the motion to deny.
Commissioner Gonzalez-Barba.
Motion to deny. Hi.
Vice Chair Renaud. Aye. Commissioner Ketchum.
Aye.
Chair Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Green.
Aye.
Commissioner Essek.
Aye.
Commissioner Keeler.
No.
Motion passed.
So the motion does pass. There is a 10-day appeal period with a $500 appeal fee. Thank you. Okay, we will move on now to the minutes from September 19th and October 17th. Yes, point of order from the audience.
Pursuant to my testimony earlier, there is a problem up the street with this application. I respectfully request the town of Fairfax, planning director, and/or town manager,
Please come into the office and ask the staff to look into that in the future. Thank you. Thank you. Got it from before. All right, just a moment while we clear the room. Could we push the button over there and turn it off? All right, let's go on to the minutes from September 19th, 2013, and review those if there's any amendments or changes to that.
Did we also have the prior month's meetings minutes to approve as well?
Yeah, we have September 19th and October 17th. I was doing September 1st. Those are the only two that we have. I think they're both in the same packet, that's what's confusing. If you see some typos, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so this is for Joanne?
Yes.
Okay. Joanne, I'm looking at October 17th, the minutes. Okay.
She has it's in the pack, it's all stapled, I know, but it's all stapled together. So look for, yes, so just making notes of the changes, it's about it's all stapled together, that's why it's confusing. It's the 5th page back.
Just after page 8. Okay. So on page 2 of the, did I say October 17th? Down in, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph. Correction for Gomez Parber should be Gonzalez Parber. And then the following paragraph is a duplicate of the one above, but it's with a different name.
Do we know which one it should be attributed to?
It should be the first one. It should be
Okay.
Commissioner Gonzalez Parber, and the other one should be struck.
Okay, thank you.
Struck out. On page 4, should I go over that again?
So I use a cross on the shall pass.
Yes, that whole sentence, I think it's variation of the first one. And Commissioner Gomez Parber should read Commissioner Gonzalez Parber. And then let me know when you're ready. Page 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th paragraph. I'm not sure if that's it looks like a mistake on the first sentence. It says Al Balak of the Good Earth informed the commission that they fence a fence extension. I don't know if that, am I reading that?
No, you're right.
It's incorrect? Okay.
Strike, they fence.
It should just read the fence extension.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Okay. Page 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Fourth paragraph again. Commissioner Gonzalez Parber instead of Gomez Parber. I don't have anything against Gomez.
It's going to take us a while.
It's already complicated enough.
It's going to take us a while.
And on page 9, 2, 3, same thing. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, same thing. Oh, actually, there's one more. There's actually, yes. And there's one more.
I'd suggest doing a find and replace.
Yeah,
We can
some
run
of
a
them are
word check.
actually right. Some of them are actually right. Yeah. Okay.
I have a clarification on page 7 of the October notes. in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, second sentence where it says, Steve Franks, 19 Willow, where it says, now starts at 5 a.m. instead of 3 a.m. like it's supposed to, but he feels, I believe that it's supposed to should be amending the 5 a.m., not the 3 a.m. So it should read, now starts at 5 a.m. like it's supposed to instead of 3 a.m. as it had been. But he feels, I think that's a fairly important clarification since it's supposed to be 5 a.m., not 3.
In the September 19th, on the item regarding the Chevron station, I don't know where the first one is, but page 3, starting on page 3, it says David Creasy, the town's engineer, and his name is David Parisi. Parisi, I think. Parisi?
Sorry, where are you?
David Parisi.
Oh, yeah. It's
on page 3, second from the bottom, and then throughout. So
David Parisi, yes. It's Parisi, P-I-R-I-S-I, I believe.
that's right. Yeah. That's on.
Any other changes before we motion, decision, action, moving on? You can do them together if you want.
Well, there were only 4 of us here for the first one, so and we're all here, so I'd make a motion, and I'll just do one, to approve the minutes for September 19th, 2013 as amended. And there are only 4 of us, but we're here.
Any second?
Second.
Oh. All in favor from those of us that were here?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so September 19th passes on to the October minutes.
Motion to pass the October minutes as amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes have passed. I have a quick question, Jim, about minutes, given our new video taping system. Has there been any conversation about the need to have time required putting these in versus time stamping them or something with the video? We also have a recording that goes on. Do we feel redundant enough that we don't need as detailed, or what is your thoughts?
We need the written record still.
Okay, thank you. All right, on to item number 3, review of general plan. No, I'm sorry, planning director's report. I'm sorry, I just almost cut you out there from your director's report.
It is with great pleasure I give you the letter of certification on our housing element that just came in this afternoon. We have a fully compliant housing element, which is the largest piece of the general plan. This has been a 4.5-year effort. I came here in March of '09, and it's been a long, hard slug. We're going to have to update the matrix because now the little programs in the matrix have rippled into changes, but Bruce and I will get on that. And for the benefit of the audience at home watching and for the written record and the tape, I just want to articulate that the town, as all towns in California that must comply with the housing element law, we're required to zone for these units to occur. Contrary to what was said, we're not actually required to produce the units. We are required to create the zoning and create the opportunity for the affordable units to come. And we've done that now for 172 units, which is our last 2 quotas in the 2 last rounds of the housing element law. Our next one coming up at this point is 61 units. That will begin next year in the fall. And I think we're sitting good with the number of informal second units that we've articulated. that we were only allowed to count 3 coming into the cold on this housing element because we only have 1 year left in the period. But we fully want to try to take advantage of bringing those units in from the cold. Having articulated for the audience that it's our requirement to zone for affordable housing units, if anyone's been watching for the last 4.5 years, we've been proactively as a town trying to move forward on the Lutheran Church site for 40 units of senior housing and on the Tenolima site for 22 units of workforce housing, which is now defined in the amended housing element. We've been proactive. The town has paid for site capacity studies to test it, to win the confidence of the Affordable Housing Committee, to bring it through the General Plan Advisory Committee up to this body at that time, and then on to the Town Council. We are still being proactive. I'm going to convene a meeting about the church in January because there's been some different players involved now and some different issues that have come up. We included in our general plan CEQA analysis the build out of the church site and Tenolima and the infill in the what was the highway commercial and then was upzoned to central commercial, allowing housing on the second floor by right. And then lastly, for those 3 second units that we will be trying to bring in from the cold through the reissuance of the second unit amnesty ordinance, we will, in all due diligence, update that amnesty and try to, where it makes sense, relax the sprinkler requirement and relax the parking requirement for those areas close to town. And the town council will be having the second reading on December 4th of the new fire code. And I was tasked, it was a little uncomfortable, but 3 years ago when we adopted the prior code, I was asked by the town council to weigh in on how we might relax the fire sprinkler requirement that was being recommended for all new second units in code by the fire department, how we might relax those in the heart of town where it made sense. And we created a map that showed the center of town in the non-wildland urban interface zone, the non-WUI zone, and even beyond the non-WUI in the heart of town, which is the more flat, less vegetated area, up to a 30% slope based on the rationale that fire apparatus could get to those units. So the second readings on December 4th, that new fire code, which is updated every 3 years, will go into effect on January 1st by law, and we will have, again, tried to accommodate new second units in the heart of town where it makes the most sense. We, again, will be revisiting the code not only through the reissuance and rewriting of the second unit amnesty ordinance, but we will be revisiting the language within the second unit part of the code itself for applications for new second units. So, you heard tonight some rather eloquent arguments for why the code might be amended to accommodate infill of second units in existing structures. I think that debate, if someone wanted to open it up about fourth floors, will still be the third rail of politics in Fairfax because of the contextual setting of the majority of properties in the town. But I'm just taking a moment here to articulate this for the benefit of the audience, the tape, and the minutes, that we are wholeheartedly moving forward. We want second units in town. And Peter Ramsey, former Planning Commissioner Ramsey's wife, who spoke eloquently tonight about her project, much of the angst and challenge was because of new fire requirements for sprinklers, firewalls, all those things. We succeeded through the fire forum that was held in this room, where we took a lot of the points that we had gathered through prior planning applications that were points of contention in your mind with regard to the code, and that's where that changing came in terms of the non-sprinkler requirement in the heart of town. So this town is being proactive. We are going further. We've also we received a $30,000 grant for the church site to do geological and biological studies from the Workforce Housing Land Trust. Ironically, it was on the senior housing site. And from one of the last distributions of the supervisor's discretionary fund, we were blessed, thanks to Supervisor Katie Rice, with $10,000 on the Tenolima site to do biological and geological assessments. The 2 little wrinkles left over from CEQA. The majority of the CEQA in terms of air quality and traffic impacts had been done, but those 2 wrinkles, because of those 2 specific sites, are now being accommodated through grants that, thanks to Larry Kennings, LAK and Associates, our principal prime consultant, who fostered the goodwill in the county to help us along. And we have received recognition in the county for our efforts, I believe, in the last 4.5 years. And then finally, thanks to this letter, this certification of compliance, as you know, we now are eligible for the $300,000 to implement the Parkade Area Circulation Study recommended improvements to improve sidewalks around the Parkade, to improve crosswalks across Broadway, create crosswalks through the Parkade, and improve the sidewalk or sidewalks across Sir Francis Drake. And also create a Class 2 bike lane on Broadway while maintaining all 3 lanes, and also having through traffic going west on Broadway, 2 lanes going through, so you're not forced left on Bolinas, and the 2 little cars there past the intersection of Bolinas and Broadway go away, a sidewalk comes in, so there will always be a right turn lane, and which will allow people not have to race through that intersection quite so fast. So there's good things going on because of what this town's doing with its general plan. So that's the good news on that, and we'll come back to it in a few minutes on the matrix in terms of coming back to the general plan. The second bit of reporting I have to do for you tonight is you asked, Chair Hamilton, that we come back with a report on the synchronization of the 2 signals on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, the Valley Road Kent, and the Willow Pasture Street light. I've been out on medical leave 3 of the last 4 weeks, so I unfortunately do not have a written report for you tonight, but we did convey your concern and request to the town manager, who reminded me that this is really kind of the role of the council and the Public Works Department. And I said, well, it would help us in some of the decisions for other infill applications, and in retrospect, some of the ones we've been entertaining, and that that was, I believe, the intent behind your request. So while I don't have a written report, staff did contact the Public Works Director in San Anselmo, Mr. Sean Connery, and he reported back to us in writing that both of those intersections are actually controlled by their controller in San Anselmo. They've actually received a grant for arterial synchronization, and they have been in contact with our staff, which would be our town manager, who's also acting as Public Works Director, and our building official, who also has now 25% of his life in Public Works as a Public Works manager. And as time permits, they will be focusing on these intersections. But mind you that the entire Sir Francis Drake corridor, and Mr. Sean Connery cautions this to us, is a tricky beast. So while we may be focusing on just those 2 interviews as we blow through town, they're looking at the whole corridor and the whole flow during peak periods. So that's my report, my verbal report tonight in response to your request. Yes.
Appreciate that. I do have a question on a different site that I just want to raise concern. Recently at the former Fairfax gas site, all of the excavation was conducted, and my understanding was there was contamination, soils were removed. It was very interesting. They repaved the part that wouldn't get rained on and left the part under the canopy as gravel. And what happens when it rains? All of the water runs off the pavement straight into the gravel, which is the whole point of the work, was to prevent groundwater migration, take out the contaminated soils. So I'm very concerned that, I know there's a project that's going to happen, but leaving that open gravel, or maybe you tipped your head a little bit, but leaving that open gravel, even though it's not going to get direct rain, there's actually a lot of surface area that drains straight to that newly compacted soil and puts water right back into the site that was just being excavated. And again, with excavation, you're never going to get it all. So I think it would be very beneficial to some of the concerns of the town that they actually pave or cement, essentially cap the rest of that section. It's maybe 100 square feet to prevent the runoff from actually seeping down into the ground, because I think that's the biggest issue with the groundwater.
Thank you for saying that, and I'll bring it to the attention of both the town manager, acting public works director, and the building official.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to say thank you for looking into those street lights and just bringing our attention to who is controlling those, and that there is a process underway and that they have a grant. And I appreciate that Sir Francis Drake is a whole corridor. So I appreciate that they're looking at the entire corridor, and thank you very much for coming back to that. And for all of the affordable housing work that's done in this town, because I think it's fantastic that we have gone above and beyond just getting certified through creating zoning opportunities. And there's other towns that create zoning opportunities that everybody knows will never get built because the zoning actually conflicts with the financial feasibility of making it. So you can technically get certified by technically zoning it appropriately, knowing full well that it will never get built because it actually will be financially completely unfeasible and no developer will do it. And I'm very proud of the fact that we not only complied with our zoning to make it happen, but are actively out there making it happen in practice as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I might add that as a former member of the Affordable Housing Committee, that you have done a great job, and I've seen it myself, and I think it's a terrific achievement. Thank you.
Okay, well, at the risk of being redundant.
This time we can be redundant.
I'm okay with it this time, right? I said it to as much public as we can get, and it's the only reason I'm grateful for being televised, is that whoever's out there, we can say that we have the best planning director we could ask for, because we've been through, we've seen a few different styles, and we know we're in such a good place right now. And I was trying to explain that to somebody the other day and said, it feels like Fairfax is growing up a little bit. It feels kind of nice. So that what you said about this, actually, the rubber does hit the road on this zoning and on this plan. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate the work that you've done, because we know it's no small feat. Thank you. And to Larry, too.
Thank you. That's what keeps me going. Thank you so much. Your appreciation. Thank you. Okay. Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay.
Discussion items.
Yeah, so the matrix before you tonight, as I mentioned, thanks to Bruce and his magic hand, what you see here is we've bifurcated the matrix for just those items that have a box in the Planning Commission duties.
Can I just step back 1 minute?
Sure.
As far as using terminology matrix for whoever might be watching, and for our new commissioners, what matrix means?
Okay. In the general plan, the 2010-2030 general plan, again, thanks to Mr. Ackerman, who had been chair of the General Plan Advisory Committee, is now a member of the General Plan Implementation Committee. At our super committee retreat, where we locked the 7 members up into a room at the Inn at the Tides in Bodega Bay to get this thing finalized, thanks to Bruce, we actually organized all the programs in all 8 elements with this matrix and bifurcated by year and by responsible parties. So it's on the town's website. We will be updating the housing element piece of this because there's been some ripples on the program numbers. But if you look on the left, it starts with, actually, I don't know why the H is the first one. It should be land use, and then it goes into, it's a little mixed up. I'm not sure. Oh, I guess because these are in year 1. Well, I'm realizing little wrinkles. But anyway, the element is referred to by the letters on the left, and then your programs follow the letters. You'll see the 1 year, year 2, year 3 ongoing, and then you'll see your line item off to the shaded portion right after Planning and Building Department. As you skim down through these pages, you'll see that year 1 ends on page 3. And that's where, at the bottom, year 2 begins on the last 2 of the land use. You with me? And then going forward, same thing happens. It goes to year 3 on page 5, and then it goes to ongoing about 60% down page 6. And most of these items that are checked with the Planning Commission involve other entities as well. So it's not just your sole role. It's often with our department working in concert with you, and sometimes with the town council, sometimes with Public Works, sometimes with the Open Space Committee, etc. I think that rather than just spend a lot of time on this tonight, you might want to go through here and in your own mind sort of pick out what you feel are the important pieces that we should focus on. We have 500 programs in the general plan. It is categorically impossible with our small staff to do everything. So we've sort of, as usual, triaged our work. I can tell you, for example, the first 3 of these have been done. Conduct an annual housing element review. We're required by the state. We do that with the state through state forums. Identify, catalog, and map public easements. We've done that. Mayor John Reed, I believe, completed that task a while ago. Map and describe the town center plan area. That is actually, there is a map describing it in the general plan. We will revisit it when we start to do the town center workshops to create a town center plan. Remember, there is a town center element, and that calls for the creation of a plan. Moving down, develop an environmental checklist and develop standards for use by project applicants. That's something that is slowly being melded in actually through the new building code that will go into effect on January 1, as well as the old building code 3 years ago, which introduced a thing called Cal Green. And that's also tangential to a green building ordinance, the creation of green building ordinance. Further down, regarding the zoning changes for Tenalima and the church, when we adopted the general plan, we adopted the new zoning map that thereby changed the zoning on the CC and as well as the old CH to CC, as well as rezoned the Lutheran Church in Tenalima to planned district development. And we also changed the zoning on School Street Plaza. So, and then moving to the second page, we rezoned, as I mentioned, rezoned the church. Some of these are redundant. They show up in different elements. We rezoned the first 3 we've done, the first 4 we've done. We are in the process on revising the town zoning ordinance to bring it into compliance with the general plan, which is required by law, and we are well on our way to language that we will be recommending with regards to the CC zone, as well as the planned district development zone. That'll be coming to you. The town shall consider a bicycle and pedestrian crossing design and location at a priority as a priority along Broadway Center in Bolinas. Well, as of the adoption, we have a plan that was approved, and we've got money now to start getting shovels in the ground. The next 2 are sort of actually combined. Town should prepare a pedestrian plan for the downtown area. That's partly part of the parkade improvements plan, although this extends beyond it. And then the town should prepare a risk assessment for pedestrian routes in the downtown. Well, at least we're starting with the core nucleus of the parkade, but we will be following up as time and staff time permits, and money permits on follow-up studies. OS 1111, create an inventory of undeveloped and underdeveloped land parcels. Thanks to Mr. Kenning's firm, we actually did that ahead of time with the Open Space Committee. And there is a map showing every single parcel and what's in it, and its disposition, so to speak. Improve the efficiency of traffic flow along Sir Francis Drake. I guess we just talked about that a little bit. Establish a creekside development zone. That's something that is called for, but I'm not sure where on that list it should be, so we are open to your suggestions as we go forward. And then conservation, develop town ordinances to encourage development of gray water systems. Thanks to former Mayor Pam Hartwell Herrera, we've actually got that. Gray water systems are allowed. Moving down to the 4th item, update lot coverage definition. I think this is going to be a contentious one because FAR on small lots where people tend many people tend to want to increase the size of their house by counting the impervious surface as part of the FAR. This is going to be one that's going to be a little contentious, I think. I'm not sure when we'll actually get to it. Next one on enact a green building ordinance to reduce the amount of waste created by construction activities. Again, Cal Green, both in the prior or the current building code and the updated code, has this new piece where it is establishing best practices. The new code actually has a tier 2 and tier 3 to the Cal Green aspects. They're very onerous, and our recommendation and what the town is following is we just go with tier 1 on the Cal Green and leave tier 2 and 3 discretionary by applicants. Yes.
We may want to look at San Francisco, who now has zero construction waste and everything's being recycled and
right. And I can't speak adequately, but we have a zero waste policy now in our new contract, and I think there's some movement in that front also in terms of reducing our waste as much as possible. Zero waste really means probably 4 or 5% minimum.
So, and this is exactly what I had a question on. There's been a loophole that is in the FAR, the floor area ratio, related to, quote, green building that was established in like 1990. And it sounds to me like Cal Green actually far exceeds whatever standards obviously that did exist. And I would really hate to leave something like that in if we're adopting Cal Green and then we put exceptions to the floor area ratio related to very old, like you used fly ash in your foundation, therefore you can have a bigger building. So I think there's two ways to deal with it. One is to simply remove those variances, or to look at tier 2 and tier 3 of Cal Green, which you're saying are exceptionally
as an incentive
difficult, but at least there's a standard that's being established that would sort of be that accommodation for additional
right.
size.
I do now remember
like
you're bringing this. I'm sorry.
But I do think because I don't, like you're saying, you're going to package all those zoning changes into a package. This is part of the zoning chapter, but obviously it's a very different part. And so I think it would be valuable to upgrade and update at the same time.
Right. We're still pondering the idea of beefing up the Cal Green section with a green building ordinance per the Build a Green rating system. Because if I remember, your concern before was our code's really loose in terms of, well, what do you get for doing what? It's not quantifiable. So that point system allows you ways to quantify if you reach a certain threshold, then this is what you might get.
Yeah, so I don't want to, I mean, I guess I'm at the question point of, do we leave a loophole in for another year, or do we, as a commission, make a recommendation to remove it? Because this would actually, if they adopt the Cal Green next month, this would actually take away from that as that process moves forward. Or maybe you could take it straight to the town council and say, as part of this adoption, we want to clear. I don't know where you are with it. So.
If you're comfortable with it, let me take it under consideration, give it some thought, revisit the code where it is, and come back with some recommendations when time permits.
Yeah, and I guess I want to make sure that if it's as simple as when the council is adopting Cal Green, that the loophole's removed at the same time, or if you've already done readings and you can't do that, then that's different.
It's amending the ordinance, so it's not as simple as you think. So I think Cal Green supersedes our ordinance in a way, but let me do some
research.
Let me burrow into it as
I just don't want to leave a loophole for a couple of years.
Right.
Excuse me, is there a public access to the Cal Green online or something?
I think it was in the packet last month, and it should be in the packet, or at least reference to where you can find it online. It should be in the packet for last month and also for December 4th, which will go out on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Sure.
I can send you a link. I have a link for all the different building codes. So you're allowed to look at them online. You can't print them, but you can look at them online.
So completing sort of the quick synopsis here when we get into the incorporated noise analysis in the town center plan. And then that sort of revised the project application to require noise analysis if the proposed development would be exposed to sound levels exceeding the noise ordinance levels. In other words, building technologies that reduce the noise impact inside. And that gets us to the end of year 1, which lapsed in April, and gets us into year 2. So I leave you to review this in our second year here, and we can continue to discuss this as we go forward. Ironically, the Climate Action Plan, which is the next discussion point, isn't on here, which kind of surprised me, but we're coming to you tonight out of courtesy with the draft Climate Action Plan, even though it's not articulated here that that's your role. The town manager and myself felt that it was important for you guys to have a chance to weigh in on it on its way to council. So if I could move on to that next item on the agenda, and again, you can shoot me your comments on these. Maybe we can continue to agendize this, and as time permits on our agendas each month, sort of, give me some feedback on what you think is more or less important, and I'll continue to brief you, if only through my manager reports, on what we're focusing on and what's taking most of our very precious time. Yes.
So the other just point of where this information goes and how it gets shared between the two, between all the bodies in the town, that the general plan is meant to be kind of the connective tissue, if you will, between all of the various commissions and local government bodies. And as such, there's the General Plan Implementation Committee, which is like the ombudsman to transport and to help share that information and kind of keep an eye on things moving forward. So I'm on that committee, and that committee then reports to the town council on a periodic basis. So there's a report coming up, and that committee then goes out to all of the commissions and says, okay, how are you doing? What have you moved forward on? What are you prioritizing? Because we're going to report to the town council. So that's coming up, and that's part of what this in and out process is, to report back to that committee on progress and how things are going. So that's another feedback loop.
And Bruce is here to add a few words, I believe, on the Climate Action Plan. Would you like to? Oh, yeah, he's here to field any questions, but let me just reiterate again. This is going to council on December 4th. You don't have to give me all your comments right now. This was just, again, a courtesy to touch base with you all. There are some numbers here that are being updated by our Marin Climate Energy Partnership staff, Christine O'Rourke, who is working with a template that ICLEI provides for calculating these things. And each policy that we're entertaining here gets sort of calculated. So while this is going to you tonight and the council on December 4th, there are numbers that will be revised. So our strategy on December 4th with the council, and again, please send me any comments you have. The council's not going to take final action on this on December 4th. They're going to, our approach is going to be put this on the consent item, because we have a large and contentious agenda on the 4th. The Chevron station has had a directed referral by a council person, which is a type of appeal, if you will, and that will take up a great deal of time, we guess, on December 4th. So we're going to put this on consent, along with a letter that the subcommittee, the ad hoc subcommittee in the GPIC, comprised of Cassidy DeBaker and Mr. Bruce Ackerman here, took the bull by the horns after many, many committee meetings with everybody trying to chew on this. They took it off and really whipped it into shape with Christine O'Rourke. And they also have a letter that they prepared that will go in the packet for the council, that will go out early. It will go out on the Wednesday of next week because of the Thanksgiving break. And that letter is recommending the creation of the Climate Action Committee, as called for in the general plan. It's called the Fairfax Climate Action Committee, the FCAC, or we now abbreviate it the CAC. And that letter will be in the packet, recommending that the GPIC sort of chooses, this is up to the council to decide, but the GPIC is making recommendations on the composition, how it's formed, that two members of the GPIC are members of it, one's a chair, and has the responsibility of reporting the CAC's activities to the council in the future. And that once that, and so we would come back then in January, on January 15th, with the complete numbers. We will have fielded any comments from you all, any comments from the town council, and we will also have a resolution on January 15th establishing the new committee, the Climate Action Committee. So that's the game plan. And
that resolution is the town council makes the decision on
yes,
that, not us.
Yeah, that's right. And again, we're here as a courtesy stop to get your input. This is going to be a living document. This is just the first cut. Even when it's adopted on January 15th, hopefully, final adoption, accepted on the 4th, December 4th, adopted on January 15th, this will continue to live on. And one little exciting piece that I'll stop with, Bruce, and then let you answer any questions, is that we've had a really fun time both at the Marin Climate Energy Partnership Committee as well in the GPIC, and prior to that, the GPAC, contemplating some way to visually show the town how we're doing. And that sort of report card. And the MCEP, the Marin Climate Energy Partnership Committee, which I was chair of up until September, our new webpage is up and going, marinclimate.org. And we have a grant, $80,000 grant, where we are going to be creating the first of a kind that we know of, and that ICLEI and that Christine O'Rourke knows of doing a report card for the whole county on how each jurisdiction is doing within the county and comparing one jurisdiction to the other. So we can get a little friendly competition going here on how well we can get to the finish line of reducing greenhouse gas production and as well as CO2. So without further ado, Bruce, you have anything to add? Or do you have any questions for Bruce or myself?
I have a question. I wish this were page numbered, but at 3.3 land use and transportation, which I guess is 2/3, there's a chart about gasoline and diesel, and I was just wondering if biodiesel had been contemplated, or can it be?
I'm afraid I don't actually have a copy with me, but those that would be a question that I can pass on to Christine O'Rourke, because she is working on these numbers, and not only the numbers, but some of the actual items in these will probably change as she works through them. The tables and the numbers that are sprinkled throughout this document actually are continuations from an original document that was provided by MCEP as sort of a prototype for all the different jurisdictions in the county, including Fairfax. Jim brought that to us, and it was a wonderful starting point for this work, but we've done a lot of work Fairfaxizing the programs and the intent. Generally speaking, I would say making it a lot more action-oriented and having more teeth in it. But the tables and the numbers basically haven't been edited at all. So that's going to get a lot of change. That's what Christine is working on right now.
And the basis, tearing off of those tables, I don't believe those tables, like as you see in this table here where it says gas and diesel, the foundation tables or the comparative tables, the baseline tables, didn't have biodiesel as a category on them. And so there wasn't any baseline data from which to then calculate on top of, if it didn't already exist as part of the template that we were given for the baseline data.
Okay. Well, I do want to. I had that comment, but I do want to applaud you. I did read this, and it's like yes. I kept thinking all the way through. This is the right way to go. But I would like to see an analysis anyway of biodiesel. And part two of that question is, what does the fire department think about using biodiesel in its trucks? We have the buses, I think, but we.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is not really related to this document, but I think that there are grades of biodiesel, and that's probably what the fire department would be looking at, as a very high grade that would not gel, especially when it's been sitting for a while, which would be an important thing for fire equipment. But yeah, it's a possibility that they could.
I know that with diesels from the boating world that some of the diesel engine manufacturers won't guarantee the engine when you start using different fuels. But I'm not up on all the issues now.
Well, we have clean diesels coming from Europe now.
Absolutely.
I've been to England recently, and they have diesels getting close to 90 miles a gallon, and they're clean. It's just amazing what they're doing with.
All of you, please, if you have any follow-up, thoughts as we go forward, please give them to the chair, who's a member of the GPIC, Bruce, or myself.
And we're also welcome to show up at the December 4th meet. No, it won't be on, it won't, but it's on consent.
Yeah,
so
no, it's
they
on
won't
consent.
be discussing, but we can also send in emails and things like that to
Yes.
the GPIC and that kind of thing.
And again, this is a living document.
So I always appreciate Bruce because he has great words. Fairfaxizing, I like that.
It's like supersizing. Is it like supersizing?
No, it's Fairfaxizing.
That's
and
the Fairfax character we were at.
for some of us, we remember the trails we were calling Fairfax Ways.
Yes. Fairfax Ways.
And Bruce is always good with
I think Bruce was
with
involved in
words.
that as well.
Exactly. One question and then kind of a comment is, I'm actually curious on, do we know right now what percentage of Fairfax residents actually participate, like in Marin clean energy?
I don't know the figure, but I recently heard that it's kind of low. Yeah. Oddly.
I mean, those are the kinds
of... arguably the town where it all began.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Those are other things. I mean, there's climate action plans, but then there's actually things that could be looked at in different ways. So,
well, one of the primary areas within this that I think will get, at least for me anyway, immediate attention is to try to put together the meter, which is based on one of the elements in the conservation element of the general plan. Really, it would probably look more like a graph, but maybe if we can find somebody who designs things a little bit more creatively than I've heard, maybe it would be a better design even than that. But the idea would be to, you can see there's a table in here on, and I agree with your comment, it would be nice to have page numbers, wouldn't it? We'll have to do that. But there's a table in here in which we talk about what might be done if we could pull it off on that meter, which would include all of the ongoing electrical usage in town, all the ongoing water usage in town, and so forth. One way to break out the electrical usage then would be by deep green electricity and what's it called, regular green electricity, the MCE standard package, and then PG&E electricity, which is for those people who have opted out of the MCE. So if you actually have all three of those figures, then by looking at the power content label that each of those produce every year, you can actually calculate greenhouse gas emissions directly from that. And we could actually update that every month if we can get that data, how much each one of those sectors used in total kilowatt hours per month. You'd actually be able to see a graph that shows how we're doing.
So Bruce, I think one thing I have to say it because you're an engineer and you could design it is you could design the Fairfax meter, which would be that many steps above the smart meter, but actually provide the information that you need to have. And then we could embrace it.
An alternative to the
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this would be on a monthly basis, not a minute-by-minute basis.
You got to get the data somehow.
I could just point out one thing. Gosh, it will help to add pages to this. But Figure 3, gosh, it's after Table 2. It's the ecological footprint comparison. I just want to point out what Marin County stacks up at relative to the rest of the United States. We are high, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, aren't we the highest county in the country? Something like that?
One of the 2 or 3 highest, yeah.
Yeah. So ironically, we get wrapped as the environmental mecca, and yet we have one of the largest carbon footprints in the country. So, and then Bruce and Cassidy also added some very eloquent language about why, given Fairfax's reputation within the reputation of Marin County, it's so important for us to lead the way, and to do the right thing. So we're on the precipice of here some really good action. And it's really kind of fun for me tonight to present you both the letter of certification on the housing element and now a complete draft cap. As you know, it's just an enormous amount of time that goes in to get these things to this point. And so thanks Chairman Hamilton and Bruce and the rest of the GPIC members. And by the way, the GPIC is on the town's webpage. It talks about who's on there, who's representative. And likewise on the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership website that just rolled out a month ago, marinclimate.org, it will also archive all the other jurisdictions in Marin's climate action plans. And once we adopt ours, that will go up on that website also.
I just want to make a comment. In our house, we replaced most of our light bulbs with LEDs. You can't do it everywhere. And we actually got a letter from PG&E congratulating us on a 20% drop in energy use. It works. It's not that expensive. I want to encourage somehow Fairfax Lumber to carry a wider selection of LEDs if we can, something like that.
Right. And with Christmas coming, it's important for people to remember they have a policy choice with the type of Christmas lights they purchase. The LED Christmas lights are much less intensive. Some stores are actually not selling the incandescent bulbs anymore.
And they're much safer. You won't burn yourself on them.
I'm sorry?
They're much safer. You won't burn yourself. I think of Christmas, we've gone from candles to like these electric bulbs that would, just to be huge, and then regular lights that could still set your tree off, and now we're to like these LED lights that the kids can nobody's going to get hurt. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
All right.
Okay. Well, we've done the general plan. Wow, we've done a lot tonight. A good evening. And I believe that unless there are any other comments or requests, we have one comment.
Two people who pointed out to me. Our really fabulous crosswalk by St. Rita's and the library, the lights flash and everybody's happy with it. And now I've heard that the one by Manor and the one by Good Earth
have stopped working.
And I remember a couple of years back, actually, the town manager weighing in about how the replacement lights are so expensive, and but I've heard since then that there's actually more reasonably priced replacement lights. So that's a public works thing, but it's on the record now, and we'll put it on the list. And by the way, there is on the town's website explanations on how to call in issues like that to town staff.
I want to make one comment since you mentioned that, is on a practical level, parkade improvement of sidewalks. There's a section across the street from the Barefoot Cafe where if you're walking, it gets narrower and narrower, and then the sidewalk actually leans toward the street, and you could fall into Sir Francis Drake. And I just want to make sure someone is on that.
Oh yeah, there's that was actually part of the projected improvements of completing as much of the sidewalk around the parkade as possible, particularly in that section there. It is a lawyer's dream.
Slip and fall cases.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying in terms of litigation. And we have several sections of town like that. So yeah, that's right up there with the priorities on the implementation of that. And we've got the money coming now.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, we will have to do engineering drawings and converse with Mr. Parisi to make sure that we're doing everything just right. But it's going to be exciting, and it's here we are on the cusp of starting a town center plan development process through public participatory workshops, And we've got this little nucleus now that at least we can start to improve as the heart of town for circulation of pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles for that matter, and the transit stop, which is also called for improving the little transit stop there. And maybe that's where the meter should go there in the beginning of town or something. Anyway, it's exciting. We've got some good things going on. And that is, by the way, the town center plan process is another big one coming up after we get now that we've got the housing element put to bed, we'll have the climate action plan put to bed, and the intern and myself will very shortly be starting to do a series of background studies as a starting point for the public workshops to get everybody sort of on the same page of what the problems and opportunities are. And we'll schedule a series of workshops, hopefully culminating sometime in the fall of next year with a draft improvement plan for the heart of town. And there will be some wonderfully challenging issues, and that is managed parking and what that means potentially, and the potential of using Bolinas Avenue between Bank and Broadway, either partially or to whatever extent as a pedestrian zone. These are going to be very heartfelt issues for the town to consider and embrace.
Well, if they can do it in London, we can do it here.
Hey, even Italy has car-free days.
All right, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second. All in favor? Aye. None opposed. See you all whenever.